Welcome back to another week of The Conversation with me, Jordan Brown. It is so nice to see you again. This week, we'll be talking with Miss Jacqueline San Nicolas, a music therapist who is passionate about the intersections of mental health, feminism, and social justice. Her goal is to ensure that mental health care is more accessible and inclusive for the most marginalized in our communities, and to inspire and bring discussions of mental health and wellness into our common environments using the commonality of music to build and repair relationships. Jacqueline works with all sorts of people, ranging from teenagers to adults, and has been very passionate about this work throughout her entire life. And I am so excited to talk to her today, and you should be too. Enjoy. Welcome. It's nice to see you, Jacqueline. I literally have not seen you since the beginning of the pandemic. It has been a long time.
I know. Been a long pandemic, a long year, but I'm glad to be here. Excited to continue conversations that we kind of started that night, honestly. So excited.
Me too. Okay, so let's really get into it. I would love for our viewers to know just what is music therapy? Like, what is it about? Can you tell us?
Yeah, so I'll give you like a couple definitions. So one that music therapists use a lot is music therapy is the use of music to achieve non-musical goals. So those can be physical, emotional, behavioral, mental, psychological. One way that I define music, like I define the way that I try to act and function as a music therapist, all those things, but towards a liberatory practice. That's really important for me. And it's something I've really kind of wrestled with. Like, where does abolition fit into therapy? That's been something that I've been like kind of grappling with. But I say I, as a music therapist, work in conjunction with people not above them, to work collaboratively, to use music as a medium to rebuild connections, heal, and connect, highlight strengths, and connect to other bonds. So that's my definition.
Beautiful. So you said that you use this work to kind of have this space where you're able to do more than what a traditional therapist would do in aspects of like thinking about abolition and thinking about liberatory practices. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in traditional talk therapy and other therapies, there tends to be right and wrong answers. But because in music therapy, we're in a creative space, right? The point is not, we like to say it's about the process, not the product, right? So it doesn't matter if the song you play or a song you create sounds wrong, or it doesn't matter if they give the wrong answer. It's about exploring what are those possibilities in that space? How are you allowing your client agency to choose for what they want, to choose for what feels right? And if what feels right is like a very chaotic drumming playing, if what feels right for like, especially when they're teenagers, is using curse words, that's how they feel. And like, we shouldn't like policing emotions, I think, is something that happens, unfortunately, a lot within the therapeutic space. So this is one of the times where I think in particular for teenagers, there is a time to just feel a little bit more freedom, to feel a little bit more control over their lives. So yeah, that's something that's definitely come up a lot in this past year, and something that I've had to really adjust my expectations to, because time is so structured right now with COVID, with a lot of people doing I have clients who do like 6+ hours of Zoom therapy. So if they are goofing around doing music, like that is normative. That is what they need. That is like being a teenager, being a kid. Like that's part of what we're doing. It's quality of life stuff. But it was definitely really hard coming from a like place where like we're told in grad school, like you have to defend your profession. You have to show them that music therapy is legitimate, but like also bringing that back to like who defines legitimacy and why are we begging it from them? So, yeah.
Powerful. And I'm thinking about it like, one thing I always hear about this liberatory, this freedom work is that we really have to have imagination to think about what possibility can even be. And with imagination, we really can't go anywhere, because if we want to be in a situation, outside of the situation we're in now. We have to think, we have to dream our way out of that. And I feel like when you're creating music in that space, you have to start from somewhere, even if it's sampling, because sampling, you know, they take a song and they completely deconstruct and destroy it into something beautiful, into something different, into something new.
Absolutely.
And it's like, I can imagine that your clients would do that as well.
Yeah, I've definitely had that sampling or like song rewrites. I did that a lot with one of my internship placements. I was interning at a residential treatment center for teenagers with complex developmental trauma. So these are kids who like were at like very high risk for exploitation, very high risk for a lot of just different vulnerabilities. And yeah, so even choosing a song like from an artist that like they felt like were really powerful or really badass, like was their way of like kind of assuming that power and like internalizing it for themselves. So there was definitely like conversations, like even at a music therapy conference, because one of my clients we did like wrote a verse of her own to Bodak Yellow, and we were talking about like the therapeutic uses of like different kinds of music. And there was a white woman at this conference who was me and my internship supervisor, and she was like, honestly, the use of the word bitch is really offensive to me. And my supervisor was like, but if you knew this client's story, if you knew saying like, you're not going to mess with me, you're not going to fuck with me, that is her setting a boundary. And that is for her, for someone who like hasn't been told that she can do that. That's powerful. So like, you need to like, also imagination. You can't see everything from your limited perspective. So that's also something that I've been trying to do more and more, because sometimes the songs these kids bring, I'm like, what about this is therapeutic for you? But please let me know, because I'm struggling out here. But yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's really cool then, because I've always thought of therapy as this space where not necessarily a space that brings you down, because I've learned throughout the past couple of years that this is something that can really truly help people, and I've had to kind of get out of the stereotypes about therapy and people who go to therapy and what that looks like. But then when thinking about music therapy, I often see, so I'm guessing do you mostly work with teenagers?
So right now I'm kind of at a 50-50 split between teenagers and adults. So yeah, so I'm working with teenagers in inpatient mental health, residential, and also some outpatient, and all the adults, the same populations.
That's really cool. Yeah. I've always seen, when I was looking up music therapy, I've seen it from, this is like a child's perspective, something to help like formative years, super young people. But I think that that's really cool that adults come in to use music therapy as well. What does that look like?
So right now I work for a company, I subcontract, and so the four main interventions that we do are music and meditation, songwriting, active music making, which is typically drumming. Sometimes we'll bring in a harmonic instrument or two in there, and music-based art creation. So typically we'll have a session based around like a specific theme. Like, let me see. What's the session I did? A client said they really liked Tame Impala. So like one thing I also do, like if clients are just like really disengaged week to week, then I'll flip it on them, right? Because therapy is not about doing the work for them. It's about like getting them excited to do the work, getting them engaged in doing the work. And when they're teenagers, it is a very different thing. When with the more adult clients, like they know how to take the initiative, but when you don't have the awareness, because your brain's just not there yet, and everything is just kind of like a depression fog, which we've been there. I've been there. So I asked my sister's a huge Tame Impala fan. I was like, what are some songs that you think would be like therapeutically appropriate? So they have a song that's called On Track. And the verses are more about like, I miss this, I'm missing this. And then the chorus is like, but strictly speaking, I'm on track. So I did a whole session around that where we did like music-based art creation. And So we had a discussion on like, what makes you feel on track? What do you feel like you're on track with right now? What do you feel like you're off track with? What are the tools that you're learning? So then we did some art around that. So we had them draw like, what are the activities that help you feel on track? Who are the people in your life that make you feel on track? And then we contrasted that with the off track. So then we just had a conversation about that. And teenagers typically are so much more open when you approach it sideways, right? You have to say the therapy part kind of under your breath because it's vulnerable. It's really vulnerable. And it's like really not, it's getting more and more normalized, I think, but it's still like not cool to be talking about these things, to be as vulnerable. And again, power dynamics for a lot of these kids, for all my clients, really, I see no client more than like an hour a week. So it is a lot for them to be doing this deep, intensive work. And I only come in and see them that hour. So trying to remember that power dynamics, but turning it back to what you said about kids, like I'm just having this thought now. I've never said this out loud. But we say like, oh, music therapy is so great for kids because it's when they're developing and stuff and music and stuff, all those things, which yes, because they're at such a like rapid development place, but it's also when that play space is the most normalized, right? So I think if that play space that doing just to do, not doing for like the effect, and I think capitalism has a lot to do with that, where we think like, oh, I'm not good at music, I shouldn't do it. Like, it's okay to not be good at music and just do it for your pleasure. It's okay to not be great at art and just do it because it brings you joy. And I think a lot of that has been forgotten. So it's really great to be in a role where I get to see, especially with like the older adults, they'll be like, wow, I haven't actually like drawn something out in years, or I haven't really sat down and thought about the lyrics of a song because I feel like I'm not smart enough, or XYZ, like different things like that. So again, recognizing like there's potential for play in that moment. And I think there's a lot, this is bringing me back to like a lot of the intros for like pleasure activism. And like, I think that's kind of connected in how I see it in my brain. I don't have the like, exact words, but I know it's like in that spider web for sure.
I was actually reading this book yesterday, still reading it, The Ecology of Freedom by Murray Bookchin. And in his introduction, he breaks down the difference and the distinction between happiness and pleasure. And he talks about happiness as having your survival, you have a roof over your head, you have food, you have water, you have the things that you need just to be a basic functioning human being. And then he makes the distinction between that as happiness and then pleasure as your desires being fulfilled and being able to have joy in things that are not just survival. And because of the society and the systems in which we live right now, we are not valuing pleasure at all. We're not valuing what our desire is.
Absolutely.
We're definitely valuing the happiness and the survival over that, which is why so many of our parents are like, well, I give you a roof over your head and you never starve, so I'm a wonderful parent. And it's like, but there's so much more, there's so much more to that, and there's so much more to life than just having that happiness. I think we should go after our desires. I think we should go after the things that bring us joy and make our hearts warm, and the things that get you out of the bed in the morning, because
absolutely.
Like, yes, we need food, and food gets me out of the bed in the morning because
it does.
I had a whole adventure this morning and got to see a beautiful monarch butterfly and took some pictures and did the whole thing on Search for breakfast. And I ended up getting a good little sandwich, and I had the most amazing lavender lemonade. You have to try lavender lemonade.
I love a lavender lemonade. I love a lavender lemonade.
And it's just like that. It was in pursuit of what I needed to survive. But I could have just said, oh, I'm going to go to McDonald's breakfast. I'm good. I got my stuff to go. I could have just said, oh, I'm going to have a granola bar and a coffee. I'm good to go. But instead, I went and I went through the pleasure route. And I searched for something that I desired. And I had a really fantastic morning because of that. And it's like, now I have a memory associated with it too. So it's not even that it's like monotonous. I know a lot of people right now, myself included, are talking about how we can romanticize our daily lives and how we can live in this space where it's like, oh, I just feel so good about having my day. And it's like, the way that I approached getting breakfast this morning was a really like off the wall way of doing that. And so it really was it's something that's going to be memorable, and versus just having this like monotonous, okay, I have to eat, I have to drink water, I have to do these things. And then you get them done, you forget about them. And then it's a whole chunk of your day that was completely non-memorable. And it's like, well, then you lost the day practically, because really all we have is memories. And so I think it's such a beautiful thing when we can approach life with this playfulness. And I love that that is what music therapy is about, because I feel like even in my musical work within DJing, it's just me playing the songs and seeing what the order is like, and then figuring something out. And then I'm like, oh, that sounds good. I'm gonna continue from there and do that. And it's like, something that really brings me joy. And now I'm starting to see that it brings other people joy. And I'm like, oh, yes, it definitely translates and spreads that way. And I think that that's, for me, that's something that makes music specifically so powerful. I'd love to get your perspective on what makes music so powerful for you.
Ooh, so this is again where I will, I've known as, in grad school, I was the person who kind of like talked back against the discourse. Like, that's kind of what I do. So some caveats. Music therapy is seen as a Eurocentric thing. People of color have been doing this for millennia. As long as we've existed, we've been creating. As long as we've existed, we've used art, music, dancing, the more somatic things and the less intellectual things. Like a lot of the like brain body separation, all of that is like Industrial Revolution, the Enlightenment type of stuff, right? Like that screwed over the way we think, the way we connect to our bodies, the way we connect to each other. Wait, what was this question again? What was the original question? Sorry, I'm linking it.
What about music is so powerful?
Oh, what about music is powerful? So there's a saying that's pretty common in the music therapy space that music is a universal language. And I agree with the caveat that we are all speaking it in different dialects, right? Because even a lot of the early like official music therapy work that's been done within the States has been based on like classical music. And yes, we may all be hearing the exact same piece, but based on the music you're acculturated to, you're going to interpret it differently, right? Like us Americans and like people in like the West, quote unquote, we know one thing that sounds like happy to us, right? And typically it's like major keys, whereas minor keys are used in a lot of other parts of the world. And again, this is like super simplifying things to like America is not just white Euro-Americans. Like that's not true. But to super simplify it, that's one of the reasons why people say music is so powerful is because it's a universal language. I would say that it acts more of a bridge. And I think that kind of takes some of the pressure off of the music to be perfect, or off of the music to be a certain way, or off of us even to be seeing the same thing, right? We don't have to be seeing the same thing for a bridge to work. If it's a connection piece, we can each be connecting to different parts of it. We can each be speaking. It can be multifaceted. Whereas if it's this universal language, who are we leaving out of it? What are the assumptions we're coming to it? I don't think we interrogate those same assumptions in that same way if we kind of, it's a little bit of like all lives mattering it to me, the way that I hear it and conceptualize it. So that's how I see it. I think music can be a connector. It can be, we know from studies that it does affect your brain differently. It rewires your neural pathways. It rewires, which is why it's so helpful for like simple body-based things like your circadian rhythms. Like if you listen to a song that helps you to slow down, that's a lot of what the work is done in like NICU settings. a lot of it is for the babies that are overexcited and their bodies just on their own will not let them slow down because they are so overstimulated. Which again is like why music therapy is its own distinct thing, because there is a huge difference between an 18-year-old musician volunteer going into a NICU and playing a song that maybe is in a range that the baby can't even hear, is at a decibel level that is overwhelming. So it's just adding to the stimulus, that's adding to the overstimulation, versus a music therapist who has a training of like, okay, this is what the baby can hear, this is what their needs are, and these are the kinds of rhythms and like even strums. Like it gets very specific depending on where you're at. I'm specifically not in the like medical setting for a couple of reasons, but I'm also really interested in bringing music therapy to more spaces where they're not right now, because it still unfortunately is limited access. It's a very limited access type of field. So that's, kind of my future goals are now, and future goals. I've just been thinking about like, all right, so what's kind of the next steps that I'm going into? Because the work that I found to be very fulfilling is the more community-based work.
So you think we definitely need more music therapists and doing music therapy in such a way that's liberating for both the therapist and the client and people around both of those people?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think, because you were saying that music therapy is not doing enough within this like medical space, and you want to do more community focused work. What does it look like right now in terms of what the field is doing for clients and people in therapy?
So what the field is like right now, there is a ton of research for respite care, bereavement. There's a really good field of literature there. There's a really great field of literature for autism and developmental disorders. So there's a lot of funding there. There's like, those are the fields, and like NICU settings, those are the fields like they know from a science-based perspective, which again, that's my whole spiel. They know that it works. So there's a lot of job opportunities there. But for substance use disorders, like that's why like I'm actually in this job. Like my boss transitioned to more of an administrative job because she's trying to get it into more substance use disorder settings, just because there's not a ton right now. How I would like to see it, like I think it would be great if there were like music therapists working in high schools, just doing like weekly check-in groups, right? It doesn't have to be this crisis thing. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of music therapy, just like the Western medicinal model, it's very like symptomatic focus as opposed to like systematic. And again, like funding for the arts, which has just been slashed to essentially nothing. So it's unfortunate that like I know a lot of like really talented musicians who want to do this work in different ways, but like the funding isn't exactly there yet for us. So that would be great if people looked into like that. It'd be great if like we got some like, I don't know, really rich musician to like highlight our cause. I know Zach Brown Band, if anyone's into country music, he like funds some music therapy stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm really looking into. I'm actually really considering eventually, because I'm not ready to do it and the bank account is not ready to do it. But I would love to do I want to do some work around language revitalization and music therapy, like specifically in Guam. So that's a whole story there.
That sounds like a PhD project.
Yeah. So because there always has been independence movements in Guam, but it's kind of been picking up steam in the more recent years, and there's some cultural centers. So the idea kind of sparked when I read about like in the Chamorro culture, which is the indigenous culture of Guam, a technique which in music therapy terms we would just call lyric improvisation. You have a melody and you're kind of riffing off of it, right? You're rhyming with it. You're taking a theme and doing a new verse off of it. You're taking a theme. That was part of like daily life, like pre-invasion. That was like a ritual that like kind of held families and systems together. So I read a paper on that in grad school. I was doing research for something else and that paper caught my eye. So again, this thing that is like already indigenous in the culture, it's not a Western thing. It's not something. And again, I would be coming to that project as both insider and outsider because I don't speak the language yet. So which would, I think in my eyes would, again, work to like highlight like what are the power dynamics when we're at different places, which I think, I know that music therapists, we don't do enough of. We don't do enough of analyzing our own power and how we're wielding it in certain places.
I think that's what, go for it.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that that's what a lot of anthropologists have to do when we're looking through how we're going to do this ethnography work. Because at this point in time in the field, many people are talking about, okay, how can we switch from doing the research on to doing the research with? And what does research with communities actually look like on the ground level so we're not harming the people that we're working with? How can we develop research questions with them? How can they say what they need instead of us coming into these spaces and just assuming what the community needs? And so it's like framing these anthropological questions is really important, and then thinking, how can we have this harm reduction and hopefully no harm within doing this research? But I think, unfortunately, research is kind of like inherently harmful, but there are ways to do harm reduction within that. Just specifically looking at anthropology, that's what I do. And within anthropology, like I'm actually teaching intro to cultural anthropology right now. And what my main professor has been telling us in our lectures and what I tell my students in my sections is that anthropology started from this colonialist, imperialist perspective. And we really have to recognize that happened so we can continue to get away from that so that we can do work that is really going to change not only the lives of the people, not only the lives of the researchers, but definitely the lives of the people that we're researching with, because a lot of the time we are in these spaces where we're doing this work and we're just thinking, okay, how can I get the PhD? How can I get the paper out? How can I get the board? And we're not thinking, well, what's the purpose of this work? How do I get back to my original purpose? There was something that drove me to do that work in the first place. And when we're sitting there in this writing process, we're not thinking about that anymore. We're thinking about, how can I get published? How can I get it done? How can I have so many citations? And we get caught into the academia and all the academics of it and get caught up into the politics and the posh and all of the awards and
the ways in which.
No, seriously. I was so anti the ways in which for the longest. I was like, can we stop? Can we just say how?
The word how is right there.
Can we just say how? Oh my goodness. And it's just like, when we try to like intellectualize everything to a certain level, we lose so much of the genuine, authentic touch of the actual people that we're working with. There is so much beauty in working with these communities. There's so much beauty in finding and asking and answering and solving questions that we have as researchers. And I think there's a way to do that that isn't inherently like egotistical. I think there's got to be a way that we can do that is like accessing a higher self, accessing a more healing space, and something that can be therapeutic and something that can be good for people in this exchange, in this relationship, because that's really what it is. And doing this work and thinking about it within music therapy as well, because there's so many people that you have to work with, so many different backgrounds, so many different life stories, and you have to be cognizant of everything while you're doing this work. So first off, thank you for being as
thank you. Ooh,
music therapists. We need more people like you in this field. We need people that are going to be cognizant and vigilant of everything that is going on so that they can continue to take, you know, all of the social aspects that are happening in the real world and apply that to the work. Because it's not enough for us to say Black Lives Matter. It's not enough for us to have Trans Visibility Day. It's not enough for us to talk about intersectional feminism without actually in our day.
Or use a certain playlist on one day, right? Or highlight women of color during Women's History Month. Like, I think it's something that I joke that I fell sideways into music therapy, which I didn't, because like I initially wanted to do music therapy, but circumstances happened differently. So I did anthropology in undergrad. So I see music therapy kind of through anthropology lenses. And like my favorite and I think most important anthropology professor was a Muslim woman in a refugee. So at Syracuse, which is a refugee city, which is also a primarily white institution, which is also like contributes to gentrification in the neighborhood. So a lot of these ideas of like systematic inequality and stuff, like affected how I like saw my like trajectory as a music therapist. I mean, for some context, I had my my graduate school orientation the Monday after the Charlottesville riots. In my first semester of grad school was when the Me Too movement exploded. And I had like a lot of also like some personal griefs and trauma happen as I was like in the very beginning stages of my career. So it's a lot of like, not only was this like globally happening, it was also like the ability to tap into like what is not just academia. And that's something that like I had to work with. I had some really, really intense whiplash after I was like done with grad school. And then like my brain and my body was like, you've done this robot thing for years. And like when I moved back to California and I like was not employed yet, I like wasn't really doing anything day to day. That's when I had to catch up with my own stuff, which I think is, again, if you have a therapist or a music therapist who like has not themselves been in individual therapy, I would interrogate that. I would question that. I would push back on it. Because again, until you're in that space, you're not really going to recognize how vulnerable it is for every single client, even if they're forced to be there, even if it's court mandated, even if they're 16 years old and their parents told them it's a requirement to go to this group, even if it's residential. Every time they choose to say something, choose to contribute to the dialogue, choose to play an instrument on beat or off beat, if they're trying to distract or not, every time that is their choice. That is their choice to engage with you as a music therapist. And if you're seeing it just as like hit the target goal, did not hit the target goal, played in rhythm, did not play in rhythm, you're going to miss all that like rich detail. And again, that's another thing that like I'm missing because I'm working across so many different sites. Like now I'm at like 10 different sites. So I'm not really in that like deep, rich connection with any of those clients that I miss, that I was like really doing more, I guess, big picture stuff. Because right now it's kind of just like, so what can I do in the 45 to 50 minutes to support and aid the rest of their week? But yeah, like how can I be an agent of harm reduction or just like see something visible if there's harm being done from other people or from other treatments or just, but sometimes it's just like, it's the system itself. Like the system of therapy is punitive. And I've been working with and through that a lot. And there are some people in the field who are thinking about what does abolitionist psychology look like? How do we embody that? How do we practice that? But a lot of people aren't ready for that conversation, unfortunately. And because it's a lot of, I'm going to go here, because it's a lot of well-intentioned middle-class white women in the field who, for most intents and purposes in their lives, have been assumed as innocent, and therefore like the harms that are caused are minimized or stuff. It's definitely an interesting place to be. That it's odd. Sometimes it feels like really alienating. And even as a music therapist of color, like I'm in some different affinity groups on Facebook for that, and even seeing the violences that can happen there, or the ways that the field as a whole is like, it's not ready to go places where it needs to go. But I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, what I do is my work, and how I incorporate and live my values. That's my stuff. And all we can do is keep doing the work that we can. And it's very hard as a therapist to try to not solve all these problems, because that's why a lot of us try to go in this field. But that's also the baseline truth that we need to accept. We can't fix our clients' problems. We shouldn't be trying to. And then from a larger systematic level, like, but we can imagine this better future, but we can create in this space. And sometimes that really like gets into the work. Like if I ask a client, like there's a session I do, and one of the questions I ask is like, what's a group or community that you belong to? And I used to ask that, and I would just get like, oh, I don't belong to any. I don't think I've ever belonged to anybody. Pushing that forward, instead of that being like an open and shut conversation, being like, what's a group that you would like to belong to? How is what you're learning right now helping you to connect with other people? How is it helping you to connect with yourself? Because a lot of people who I work with who have like a severe history of trauma, they're so disconnected from themselves even. So again, using music as a connection piece, even if it's just for 10 minutes where they're doing a deep breathing meditation and I'm doing some background guitar. Or if it's another thing I did with clients the other day is I played for like 5 or 6 minutes on the guitar, and I told them, I was like, I'm not going to make you read this out loud. So I'm going to preface it with that. I was like, but I want you to write down things that like you're thankful for your body for. And most of them were like, I wasn't able to think about things or all these things. But again, it's like creating the opportunity. Maybe they don't do it in that space, but maybe it just like lights a spark that they're like, I can think this way. It doesn't have to be so worksheets, black and white. It doesn't have to be so binary. It can be an imaginative space that I go to for 2 or 3 minutes when I need to, and then I can come back. So yeah, it's a whole lot of, and there's a lot of like trying to gauge music therapy by standards that like we're for talk therapy or we're for behavioral therapies. And like, yes, we work in conjunction with, but I think my work is best not when I'm trying to prove that music therapy is legitimate. My work is best when I am working in that connection space with the client to see what are their needs, how can they be aware of their own needs so that they can get it met. Not how can I meet their needs? How can they be aware of it? Am I using this tool to help them be aware? Am I using this tool to help them avoid an escape? And do they know that? Because sometimes we do need an escape from pain, from the crappiness that is life and existence. But if I spend so much of my energy, which unfortunately I see a lot of music therapists doing this, trying to argue with the powers that be and admin about why music therapy is different. Like, I know music therapy is different. Mm-hmm. I have my degree, I have my training. I've been in talk therapy. I've seen music therapy in different situations. And again, I think a lot of it goes down to a place of ego. I know what I do is different, but I know that what other people do isn't lesser. Mm-hmm. They're just using a different medium. And I don't need to have that, like, I guess, like, structural recognition that, like, what we're doing is so different for that work to be meaningful. And I think if the field as a whole shifted from we need to make ourselves separate, which I also understand there's a big money piece there, right? If we can't prove that we're different from a physical therapist, how are we going to argue for like same rates of pay? Or, I get that. As a person who, as a therapist during a pandemic, like some of those paychecks were very small because my work went from like who can do virtual to who can't very quickly. There was a time I was doing like only 3 or 4 sessions a week, which is not living wages. I'm back to normal now, which is great. Thank you, my boss. But if we're able to shift that and instead of like being so concerned with like, how does music therapy measure up to other therapies? How does music therapy measure up to itself? Mm-hmm. What are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not working? Because there's a lot that is working and there's also a lot that we need to revisit. And also so much of it is like on a case-by-case basis. Music therapy is just improv on such a larger, longer scale. So, yeah.
That is so beautiful. Wow, you really touched my heart with that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm thinking about how my own, like, coming into this major self-awareness of so many things has really guided me and has made me better able to receive and grow and to just be the person that I'm working towards and have dreamed of and now working towards to be that person. And it's like, wow, it's so awesome to know that there are other people working to help other people get to that space. And yeah, I just want to thank you. I would love to end on, for those new to music therapy, how does one get involved to maybe get in the field or also to get treatment? That's what we'll end.
Yeah. So for both of those things, you can go to musictherapy.org, which is the American Music Therapy Association website. So on that, there's a directory of like different populations that like music therapists serve. There's also there's like a frequently asked questions page. So like, how can I be a music therapist? As it is, at least in the US now, you do have to get a degree, at least undergrad in music therapy through a credentialed program through the Music Therapy Association. This is also my other thing. And I understand that it's elitist and I understand that it's exclusionary. But I also understand that like, I think there's a lot of harm that's being done if we don't move music therapy to a master's level education. I think there's because a lot of people are fantastic musicians. I've worked with some of them, fantastic musicians, fantastic music therapists. But if you don't have the trauma and counseling piece, which you don't unless you do like a master's degree that has a counseling aspect, you're not going to be prepared for it. And I've only been a working music therapist for less than 2 years. And there's already been, I want to say maybe like 10 different situations where I know that if I didn't have the counseling background, I would not have been prepared to like meet the client where they were. I think there's an assumption that like, unless you're working with a trauma specific population, you're not going to have to deal with trauma. But the fact of the matter is we're all traumatized by capitalism, life, racism, all the isms. So that's how you do it. How am I going to say this? I am very grateful for my training at Lesley University. That's where I got my master's. And they have a program that you can do distance ed, and you can also do it on campus. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful because that is an expressive arts therapy program with a focus in your modality. So I'm blessed to I've trained with art therapists and dance therapists and drama therapists. So I see music as not just like the piece. I see it as one piece. So I'm grateful for that. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, music therapy is great. There's so many ways that's not officially music therapy, but that people are using music for resourcing that I've seen a lot highlighted during the pandemic. So if those things aren't accessible to you, because it's very real, just an encouragement to like use music for play, whatever that looks like for you, whether it looks like playing a song, whether it's quote unquote age appropriate or not. If it makes you happy and it brings you joy, that is something that's within your power to do. And we have a lot of things that aren't in our power. So like just an encouragement to be in that joy, create space for play, create a space where failure is okay. I think that really can help like switch a mindset. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm giving you
Thank you so much. This was great. Made me think a lot.
I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I learned so much about music therapy and just how we can really uplift the mental health of our entire community. I hope that this encourages you to not only enjoy this episode and look into music therapy, but to also look at some of our other episodes. You can find them in our description box below. And if you'd like to support further, you can go to blackvoicenews.com. I welcome you. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace out.